In compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act, the notice requirements have been satisfied. Meeting dates for the year confirmed at the annual meeting are posted on the public bulletin board in the lobby of the Municipal Center and published within the first 10 days of the new year. Copies of all revised official meeting notices are sent via fax to the Record, the Suburbanite, and North Valley Press, and are posted on the public bulletin board in the lobby of the Municipal Center.
Louder.
Salute to the flag, please. As you are aware, we normally do not meet in this room. We are recording both audio and video. I would ask that the audience try and keep the noise down to a minimum, because I'm not confident of how this recording is going to work, and we want to have a nice recording of the meeting. Roll call, please.
Councilman Mahoney?
Here.
Councilman Byrd? Here. Councilman LaMasha?
Here.
Councilman Moore?
Here.
Councilman Medina?
Here.
Mayor Buskey?
Here. Revisions to the agenda, and I'm going to let the council know there are a couple of changes. Hopefully the borough attorney can explain them.
Okay, we're all to the consent agenda. On resolution 13349, that's actually on consent agenda. That's authorizing the sale of certain surplus property. Okay, we have several revisions to the agenda, and they all relate to the consent agenda. On the consent agenda is resolution 13-349 that authorizes the sale of certain surplus property of the borough. We're removing from that resolution the sale of a lot of bicycles. But other than that, with that modification, that resolution is staying on the agenda. We are removing resolution 13-347, and that relates to a refund for tax appeal. That resolution has an error in it and is being pulled from the agenda to correct the error. It'll come on another night. And we are adding resolution 13-353, and that's authorizing the borough to execute a contract concerning the provision of electrical services that resulted from a reverse auction, and that's saving the borough a significant amount of money. So that's being added to the consent agenda. So those are the only three provisions.
Bill, did we decide, are we leaving the shared services thing? I wasn't sure what we concluded in the work session.
Which shared services?
For
premises?
Yeah.
Did you want that removed? Or,
No, I don't want to remove it. I think it's good, but when we get more information.
We're going to ask the fire department for a definition of what it entails. I'm going to ask the members of the governing body to keep in mind, so that everybody can hear us, that you share the microphones, move them back and forth amongst yourselves when it's time to speak. First on the agenda tonight, I'd like to recognize the Scouts that are here tonight from Tenafly Boy Scout Troops 25 and 86. They were part of a North Jersey contingent of approximately 350 Boy Scouts who joined a total of 40,000 Scouts from 50 states and U.S. territories, as well as international scouting communities at the National Boy Scout Jamboree in July, which was held in West Virginia. The event was a week of high-adventure activities, team building, and was attended by King Carlos XVI Gustaf of Sweden, who's the honorary president of the World Scout Foundation. Among their activities, the Scouts from Bergen County performed a day of service by painting and landscaping the Cherry River Elementary School in Richmond, West Virginia. And I'd like, as I mentioned their names, I'd like them to please stand. Philip Benderly. Justin Evron. Miguel Menendez. Spagavento. Dimitrios Spagavento. And we have from Oakland here tonight, Patrick Denty. Patrick is here with his father, Rob Denty. Robert, can you stand? One of the Jamboree troop leaders who led the troop along with Wayne Morton and Larry Burke. I'd like to read, I have two proclamations, one for each troop. I'll read one of them. They're similar. Whereas the Boy Scouts of America is a program dedicated to the character development, citizenship training, and mental and physical fitness of our nation's youth. And whereas the Boy Scouts of America hold an annual national jamboree consisting of 40,000 members from across the United States and internationally, who oversee the course of the 10-day event, assist the impoverished communities in West Virginia. And whereas during their service day, the members of Troop 25 went to Cherry River Elementary School in Richmond, West Virginia, worked on a walking track, painted signs and benches, worked around a pavilion, and painted bookshelves in the library. Now therefore be it resolved that on behalf of the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Tenafly, we recognize Troop 25 and Troop 86 for their participation in the National Jamboree and in the betterment of the lives of others. Congratulations, guys. And thank you. Do we have Scout Master from 25 and 86 here? Thank you very much. Some of the names I just read off are very familiar to me because they participated in our shoveling snow for seniors. Guys, you can sit down. Thank you. And that's what scouting is all about. And Tenafly is very fortunate to have two such active troops in our midst. I will now entertain a motion to approve our consent agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Councilman Holt?
Yes.
Councilman Byrd?
Yes.
Councilman Foster?
Yes.
Councilman Moore?
Yes.
Councilman Jones?
Yes.
Okay. Lisette, we're okay with the public hearings at this time? 8:30 is fine?
It was over 8:45, so we're good to go.
I'm sorry?
We're good to go with the public hearing.
Okay.
Fine. So we're ordinances 1317, 1318, and 1319. The following ordinances were first read by title only on September 3rd, 2015, and posted on the bulletin board of the lobby of the municipal center. Ordinance number 13-17, and ordinance amending chapter 2, section 2-45.1 of the revised general ordinances of the Borough of Tenafly. Ordinance number 13-18, and ordinance to amend chapter 7 of the revised general ordinances of the Borough of Tenafly entitled traffic. Ordinance number 13-19, and ordinance amending chapter 19, section 19-2, entitled mandatory recycling.
Thank you. Public comments and then any of those three ordinances. I'll close the public comment section then. Nadia, do you want to?
Are we going to do them all together, or are we doing them each
We're going to
separately?
do the three of them together, 17, 18, and 19.
Is this the time that I can hold discussion? Or is there no discussion now?
No, all right, so you know what? We'll have discussion after the motion in a second.
Okay.
Sorry. We'll have a discussion by the governing body after a motion and a second on these ordinances.
I move to pass and adopt on second and final reading ordinances 13-17, 13-18, and 13-19, and that notice of same shall be published according to law.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Nadia, please.
So, on the 13-18, with regard to the traffic changes we're making, when we have made changes to streets in terms of not allowing parking during certain times. We've notified the residents that this was about to occur. Are we going to do that this time? Are we sending out letters to residents on the impacted streets? Or might they just see a sign be posted in front of their lawns?
When you say send out,
Yeah, I think we had done it before when we changed some of the parking around Smith School. And when we changed the parking that was, I guess, to combat the commuter parking that was happening along Engle Street and down on all the side streets, we did have to send some letters to residents to let them know that we were limiting parking on streets. Maybe we can do a reverse, a code red informational. I just want them to know that, normally they may park their cars here all day, and now that we're off to work, and there's a sign that comes back, and you can't park here anymore.
Yes, my recommendation would be a reverse 911. We have the capability to identify the specific areas through GIS mapping and make calls just to the impacted areas.
And then I got just a comment about 1319, that we are changing our recycling now to accept rigid plastics, and I just think that since we have such a large audience here, to let them know that we're allowing more plastics in the recycling. That's it.
Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilmember Mahoney?
Yes.
Councilmember Kerr?
Yes.
Councilmember Lastra?
Yes.
Councilmember Warren?
Yes.
Councilmember Tenafly?
Yes.
Ms. Adam, I'm going to ask you to do the next three individually.
Sure. The following ordinance is published herewith, the first read by title only on September 10, 2013, and posted on the bulletin board of the lobby of the Municipal Center. Ordinance number 13-22, a capital ordinance appropriating the sum of $85,550 for basketball court improvements to be undertaken by the Borough of Tenafly to appropriate $85,550 from the Bergen County Open Space Grant. Ordinance number 13-23, an ordinance appropriating $885,000 from the Municipal Open Space Recreation and Historic Preservation Trust Fund of the Borough of Tenafly. Ordinance number 13-24, an ordinance authorizing the execution and granting of a lease to the Tenafly Nature Center Association Incorporated.
John, do you want to just read the introduction to just 13-22, please?
Okay.
13-22. I move to pass and adopt in second and final reading ordinance 13-22, and that notice of same shall be published according to law.
Is there a second?
Second.
Public discussion on this particular ordinance? Is there any discussion amongst the council on 13-22? Please call the roll.
Councilmember Mahoney?
Yes.
Councilmember Kerr?
Yes.
Councilmember Lastra?
Yes.
Councilmember Warren?
Yes.
Councilmember Tenafly?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to flip now. The ordinances 13-23 and 13-24. We're going to go to the Nature Center first.
No, hold on, I object, Peter. We have, the clerk just read the ordinances in the order. That's the agenda, and we should vote on them and discuss them as described in the agenda.
I'll ask the rest of the council how they feel about it. Normally, the chairman sets the order for the meeting. I'll start over on my left. Do you have a problem? The main reason I'm doing it is we're waiting for one councilman.
We don't adjust our agendas according to the attendance of one member because they.
I know that there are a lot of people here, Mayor, who are here specifically because of ordinance number 13-24. And because of that, if the chair has the power to reverse it, it's fine with me.
Martha, you don't think anybody's here for 23?
John,
I'm sure there are people here for
John,
that.
I have no problem with that.
It doesn't matter.
Mark?
I'm fine with reversing it.
Okay, so we're going to go along with 13-24 first, which is an ordinance authorizing the execution and granting of a lease to the Tenafly Nature Center Association Incorporated. Lisette, you want to read that, please? Are you ready?
Ready.
So we're going to have public comment on this particular ordinance now. No, we have, it's in the middle of a hearing. So I'm going to ask that anybody that cares to speak on 13-24, which is the lease.
Excuse me, we did not 24.
We moved 22.
I moved 22.
John moved 22, so we're having a discussion on 22 now.
We just passed it.
If you
I'll move
look,
24,
no,
Mayor.
if you look at the sheet, it specifically says that we open the floor, then we make the motion.
Go ahead.
We want to have public comment before we move and second and vote on this.
Fine.
So I'm going to ask if anybody cares to speak on this ordinance. We're going to follow the following rules. Nobody will speak more than once. Everybody can speak once if they care to. There will be a 3-minute limit on what people have time. After 3 minutes, I'm going to wave. You can finish your thought, and then you have to sit down. Okay, I'm going to alternate as long as there's people on both sides of the issue. I'll ask that people that want to speak in favor of it stand over behind the camera. People that want to speak in opposition to it stand over on that side. And we're going to alternate as long as there's people on both sides. And then if one side is longer than the other, they can continue until everybody has spoken once. So, the young lady in the front here, you're going to speak. You need to just state your name and your street, not your address, your street for the record. And please try and keep your comments inside 3 minutes. And try not to be repetitive as well.
Do my best. Risa Rosenberg, I live on Newcomb Road in Tenafly. I'm a member of the board of the Tenafly Nature Center Association, and I'm the chair of the New Building Advisory Committee. And in that capacity, I wanted to just make a few comments about the lease that's proposed to be approved this evening. This lease is substantially the same as the lease that was previously approved by the governing body last year. The changes that were made to the lease fall into 2 categories. One are changes that were required by Green Acres, the New Jersey DEP, to comply with changes in Green Acres regulations. The other changes were changes to clarify provisions of the lease for the benefit of the borough. There have been a lot of comments made about this project, and I'm not going to go into any of them, but there are a couple of points that I do want to make about this lease, which I think is important for everyone to understand. First is, if we are unable to build a new building on the Lost Brook Preserve in the site proposed, for any reason, then the lease will revert to a 5-year lease, which is what the current lease is. The other thing connected with that is the approval for any construction is limited to that particular site that we have proposed to the governing body that has been examined and is limited in scope to approximately 2 acres. We cannot build under this lease on any other site in the Lost Brook Preserve or in a greater amount of the Lost Brook Preserve. Any changes that go beyond that would have to come back to the governing body and arguably potentially Green Acres as well, but definitely the governing body, because we would need a change to the lease. The final 2 points I want to make is, one, as we have said in our materials that are publicly posted, once the new building is completed, the Nature Center proposes that the existing building site and attendant development, except for the parking lot and pavilion building, would be returned to nature, so that that would return approximately 1 acre of land to the forest, which will mitigate the new construction. The other thing is we believe that this building will be a model for how green construction can be done in Tenafly, and will be a resource not only for the education, environmental education as the current building is, but also a resource for green construction in Tenafly going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to remind people that we are not approving the construction of the center tonight. This is merely before us is the lease, which, like it was just said, this lease is contingent upon them building the center. Before they could build the center, they would need to go before the planning board and have that approved, and I believe that the council as well, because it's on public property.
Peter, I just want to say, if you could just also tell the audience, for those who don't know, what it is you do and what it is your firm has, donated to this project. I think it's important for people to know.
We can't hear.
I said I wanted Ms. Rosenberg to indicate that fact that she is a partner at a major law firm and that her firm has donated significant services to this project on a pro bono basis. Is that right?
Technically, I'm of counsel
Of counsel, I'm sorry.
to a law firm, and yes, the Tenafly Nature Center is an approved pro bono client and has received pro bono services, including in connection with this project.
And part of those services have been actually to help compile and prepare the responses and everything for the Green Acres so that people can be better informed. Is that right?
That's correct, and the full response is posted on the Nature Center's website and is publicly available. It is...
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Al?
Thank you.
Try and speak into the microphone.
I will. The name is Alvin Myerson. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Preserving Green Acres for myself, the borough, the residents, and my wife who's out sick who will be here tonight. Green Acres Blankman land is borough-owned land that belongs to all of us. All Tenafly residents here tonight own that land, and yet a private organization, the Tenafly Nature Center, which is not part of the borough, in spite of having the word Tenafly in its name, proposes to building on 2 and possibly, I bring up possibly, 15.2 acres of that land. 15.2 acres is the amount of land they applied for when sending in an application to the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. The Nature Center leases 52 acres from the borough in its present location at the top of Hudson Avenue. That land is suitable for building as attested to by an engineer, an architect, and I believe Mr. News, president of the Nature Center, said so himself. Why they choose the proposed building on Green Acres Blankman Tract off East Clinton Avenue is a mystery to myself, my family, and a lot of my friends and residents of Stonehurst. Council members, I think it is on the rise for a private association to have so much authority, possibly 67 acres over borough-owned land, and I ask that you do not allow the building on the Green Acres Blankman Tract and say no to the 24-year lease. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on this side?
Yes, my name is David Simpson. I live at 12 Woodland Park Drive. I am not a major partner in a major law firm, but I've been practicing real estate law for 50 years, and some of my comments derive from my experience. This whole procedure is Stalinist, because yes means no, and no means yes. You made a statement, Mayor, that you haven't approved the plans. I read to you from the lease. At its own cost and expense, the Tenafly Nature Center shall construct the education center and all related structures, parking areas, and other improvements substantially consistent with the plans for such improvements and the location saying, as approved by the mayor and council at a public meeting on September 10th, 2013. Moreover, and I don't know what plans you're talking about, I am not aware that there were any plans and specifications that were ever disclosed to the council or to the public. It then goes on to say that if they wish to make any changes, the only power that the borough has reserved to itself is that if the change is substantial, whatever that means, and it's not defined, then the council has to approve these changes, their approval not to be unreasonably withheld. I said to you last fall, and I say to you again, that that is not the way that the town should be handling its property. It should not be ceding over that kind of authority to a private organization. It should not be subjecting itself to the potential of litigation with no provision in this lease that it will be reimbursed for its legal fees. And beyond that, I repeat what I said. The Nature Center shall construct a center substantially consistent with the plans approved by the mayor and council on September 10th. So that means something, even if you choose to ignore it. I have some other comments about the lease. There is absolutely nothing in this lease, despite the fact that I raised this question quite seriously last fall, that requires the Nature Center to provide any evidence of its financial ability to commence and to complete the construction of a facility that by its own admission has now grown to cost $7 million. I think that is the height of their responsibility. And I know that last fall, your council advised you that you were protected by a New Jersey statute that provided for bonding. That statute applies for bonding in projects which are being paid for with public money. Supposedly that is not what's happening here, and the fact that in the resolution of September 10th, some language was slipped in about this being a borough-sponsored project is obviously an attempt to fall under the umbrella of that statute, but it doesn't possibly operate that way. Another thing that's never been discussed has been the cost of the off-site improvements, the road improvements, the expansion of 9W, or of Clinton Avenue. Who's going to pay for that? There's not a word in this lease that obligates the Tenafly Nature Center to pay for any of that. There's no requirement that they complete the facility with any particular time. There's no penalty if they stop construction and they don't continue. And as I say, the fact that there's no requirement for proof that the facility can be built with funds that this Nature Center has in hand before it starts, I find absolutely astounding. Now, I'm sorry to have to bring these things up, but what's been going on here is Stalinist, because you have not listened. You sit up there, you ask no questions when people like myself raise these issues. Nobody seems to care. You go your merry way. This lease is the same lease, except for the references to the Green Acres approval that you provided last November. And it doesn't meet any of the concerns that I expressed and other people expressed. And frankly, a partner in a major law firm or a counsel in a major law firm should understand the deficiencies of this lease. Thank you.
Because it's really important, and some of the issues that Mr. Simpson has raised are really great concern to me. And we talked about it, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, the land use law that you talked about. So can you kind of get it?
Yeah, Mr. Simpson is talking about a different statute. You look at and without getting into a legal argument with Mr. Simpson, the reference he made to in terms of bonding is a different statute. I'm talking about
Speak into the microphone, please.
I was referring to the Local Lands and Buildings Act that requires that funds be available, that the funds actually be available if in case of any construction on publicly owned property, whether or not it's done through the use of public funds. So if we were to have a tenant who was going to build a building on publicly owned property, then they're required to have that money available. Certify the money is available. We're not going to be in a situation where the Nature Center does not provide adequate assurance that in fact the funds necessary to complete the project are available, because they're required to do that by law. So it's being constructed on public property will be a building that belongs to the municipality once it's completed, because it will be a fixture created on borough-owned property. So their requirement to comply with all applicable state, federal, and local laws binds them to the New Jersey Local Lands and Buildings Act.
So Bill, can you read the statute? Would it be good enough to read the statute?
I have read the statute more than once today.
No, I'm asking if you would read it so the audience can hear it.
I'm not reading a statute for an audience here, and I don't have that statute.
Even on something as important as this.
Please, you had your chance.
So Bill, just to be clear here, what you're saying is that based on the Local Lands and Buildings Act, that prior to a shovel going in the ground, the TNC will have to come before this governing body to present financials or an surety bond or whatever to demonstrate that adequate sufficient funds are there for the completion of the project. Is that what they're saying? Am I understanding that correctly?
They're going to have to satisfy us that in fact adequate funds are available. Either that they've got commitments for the funds and adequate assurances that in fact the construction.
I guess the question that Mr. Simpson and I'm gathering others in the audience, and frankly myself, as I've raised the issue, if that's the case, what would be the issue in your mind with simply, adding that language, just adding a line or two that says, prior to construction of the project that, the Nature Center shall provide, adequate proof of sufficient funds to complete the project. If that is what the law says, what would be wrong with putting that into the lease form?
I don't think the Nature Center would have a problem with that. I certainly obviously would not have a problem with that. Whether it's necessary or not is an argument that I'm not going to engage in, but we have representatives here.
So if that's the case, is that something, we can, do? Can we mark that up to do that? Is that something that's really doable? I mean, I certainly would be, and I do accept your interpretation of the act. I think it would, though, make me more comfortable, and since it's not going to have any, substantive effect on the project, why not just put it in? I think it would make some comfort to others in the audience.
Barry, if everyone up here wants to do that, you can certainly make that a condition of adoption of the ordinance. I don't think that would be, I would say it's not a substantial change that would require republication. If you're going to require that as part of the best of the ordinance, that's fine with me.
That's one of the things we'll talk about after public comments finished. Do you want to speak or you're a judge? Sure.
Hi, my name is Joey Dweck. I live at 45 Churchill Road here in Tenafly. It's the first time you've seen me come to a meeting. I'd like to use the first 30 seconds of my valuable 3 minutes to thank all of you, because I know it's a thankless task, and I do know that you all believe that the Nature Center, the moving of the Nature Center is in our best interest. Let's have no doubt about that we're all on the same side. My chief, I'm the president of the Stonehurst Manor Homeowners Association, but I am not speaking on their behalf. I'm speaking only on my own behalf. The Stonehurst Manor, if you do know or don't know, consists of about 125 families that abuts to the Nature Center. My chief objection is that I don't think that the council fully appreciates the environmental impact that this project is going to have, okay? Both in terms of the geography and in terms of the culture and the environment. And as I get older, and I'm in the computer business, so I'm used to change. But as I get older, I've grown more recalcitrant in my desire to embrace change that speaks to maybe improvements or maybe income. So as my friends, which you are, and we are on the same side, I don't know if your minds are made up yet, but I'd seriously like you to reconsider this entire project. I know it's a big ship moving forward. Maybe we can move it slowly back. Thanks very much.
Mark Aronson, 220 Buckingham Road. I would urge the council tonight to take their time, not vote on this resolution, table it if that's a possibility. When I was back in June, when we had the hearing on the Nature Center, I had urged the Nature Center administration to present both options, the one on East Clinton, as well as the one to expand and renovate the existing location on Hudson. That never happened. And I'm very disappointed that has not happened from the Nature Center point of view. And I'm also very disappointed that the council has not urged that happening. I think the community deserves to see the two options. And if the East Clinton option is in fact the best option. Let us see all the facts, let us see all the research that's been done, and let us make that decision as a community, not as a private organization in a group of 6 individuals. So I'm urging you to table this resolution and let us see all the information and make the decision ourselves. Thank you.
Peter, I just wanted to ask Mark a question. I'm not sure what alternative proposal, because I'm not aware.
Microphone.
I'm sorry, I'm not aware of an alternative proposal. I know I've heard certain folks talk about it, not from the Nature Center, but I personally am not aware of a formal alternative design or analysis of what this other proposal that this council should consider. So can you talk about it? Or can you...
Sure. Barry, when we had Michael and Jennifer at our home back in June with a group of citizens from the community asking what the options were, and they were very kind and showed us the drawings and all the research and data on East Clinton, we point blankly asked them if for whatever reason the East Clinton project can't go forward, whether that be council denial, whether that be environmental or agency denials, for some reason it can't go forward, could the project be renovated on Hudson? The answer was yes.
Is there someone from the Nature Center here? Could you address that to us?
Sure. Yeah, that's the question.
Barry, let's let each person speak their piece, and then during discussion, we can bring those things up, okay?
Fine, but I think it's, Peter, I think it's really, I mean, at this point, this is like kind of our final discussion on this for a while. I think it's important that some of these assertions and, really get dealt with.
Mayor, would you repeat your remarks, please? They were not...
I asked her to sit down because the woman up here it's her turn to speak.
No, but you commented about...
No, I asked her to sit down.
Okay.
My name is Caroline, and I live on Knickerbocker Road. I'm 14, and I'm a freshman at Tenafly High School. I'm going to keep this brief because I wrote it on my iPhone a couple minutes ago. And I decided to speak today because of the comments I've heard. I think I speak on behalf of the Tenafly High School when I say we care a tremendous amount about our environment. The Tenafly Nature Center's current building is not in any condition to educate people and kids about nature the way it can be. My friends couldn't be here today because they're doing homework. I know them and their parents very well. So I think that the majority of the people in support of this ordinance are not here to support it, and I urge everyone here to reflect on why they're really opposing this ordinance. This project is going to help not only the people here, but me. It's going to help my best friend and all of my friends. Thank you.
My name is Ruth Bernstein, 140 Thatcher Road, Tenafly. You asked, Councilman, about the proposal for the Tenafly Nature Center, the alternate proposal. Well, around 2 or 3 years ago, I was at a dinner at which the mayor was present, given by, and the Tenafly Nature Center had a very large architect's drawing of the proposed building, and that was on Hudson Avenue, to renovate that building. Obviously, somebody from the Nature Center must have approved that, and that was how they were going to plan to raise the money. They were talking about raising the money for their new center, which was going to be on Hudson Avenue. I saw that. I know the mayor was there. He saw that. So there was a drawing. It was considered. And I think most people definitely realize that that building that presently is outdated. It has to be renovated. The parking lot has to be improved. So we're not against improving the building. We just think it's a tremendous amount of money to spend on, even though we're not spending it, and supposedly we're not spending it. But the location on Clinton Avenue is a very busy street. I think it would be a very busy street, and we should not build it there. It's also on Green Acres land, whereas the other building is on borough land, if I'm correct. It was there before Green Acres came. So I really feel that we should postpone this vote. Think about it. Let's wait for the federal government to come up. I think we haven't fulfilled all the requirements. Why are we rushing? And I'm really sorry the meeting was held tonight, because this is a night that had, I know 3 public schools are having parent-teacher meetings. Oh, it's open school night. I think it was, unfortunately, many people are not here tonight because of that. Thank you very much.
I would like to add that, yes, I was at that dinner dance, and the Nature Center was looking and did make some preliminary plans to build a new center. I don't believe it was a renovation. I believe it was a new center up on the top of Hudson Avenue, and I think it would behoove them at some point in time. I know that you've been talking about it, but obviously there's still questions in a lot of residents' minds about why you changed your choice from Hudson Avenue to East Clinton. There must be some reasons behind that. I'm familiar with them. I'm satisfied, but obviously a lot of the residents are not satisfied. So maybe at some point tonight, when members of the board get up, they might want to delve into that a little bit. I think those are questions that should be answered. Sir? Once again, anybody that wants to speak for it, they're opposed there, and we'll alternate it. There's nobody standing on one side, we'll continue on the other side.
My name is Mark Drimes. I am a resident of 33 Kenwood Road, been here in Tenafly for almost 40 years. I haven't attended any of the borough council meetings, but I was moved to express, I don't like to use the word outrage, but I am outraged by the prospect of digging up virgin land, tearing down trees. It goes totally against my nature. I know many people in the town feel the same way. I don't understand why this has not become a public referendum. You folks are supposed to be representatives of the people. How do you really truly know how the majority of this town feels unless you do take a vote? All I can say is at this moment here in this room, the applause seems to be quite a majority of voting against this. And I want to express and agree with that sentiment. Thank you.
Thank you. I mentioned earlier about recording this meeting, and I get the sense that people that are moving their hands on that podium, it's quite loud. So when you're up there speaking, if you could try and keep your hands from banging the podium, I think it would be helpful for the recording. Sir?
Hi, my name is Paul Keys. I think about the Nature Center and the opportunity here. I think about this Nature Center and the opportunity. It's really an incredible site because, environmental education, I call it like the trifecta of environmental education. We have this great land, these hundreds of acres to use, and the Hudson River ecosystem in New York City. It's like the perfect storm of opportunity for environmental education. And I don't see you all voting on the lease tonight, but voting on something much more important, and that is opportunity. It's a great opportunity for Tenafly, not only for environmental education, I think we made that pretty clear, but for community development to take a step forward, to bring something tremendous and tremendously important to this community, and really change the face of the Nature Center and how we educate people in this community. So, to me, this is not just a vote on the lease tonight, but more a vote on this great opportunity that we have to move forward and take a giant step forward here. So, I would appreciate, and I appreciate everybody's comments here tonight, I hope that you support this project and vote yes on this lease, and let all these volunteers who work so hard, and that is volunteers, to bring this project to the table, move forward with this, and create this magical space that we're presenting. Have a good night. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Judy Anderson, I live on 220 Buckingham Road.
Folks? Please.
Thank you. I want to just echo my support for the importance of education for the environment, because I agree very strongly with what Mr. Keys is saying, but being a teacher myself, I know that extraordinarily effective education can take place in a parking lot. It can take place any place where you have creative educators. And if we want to improve the way we're teaching people in our community and the community beyond about how to respect the environment, it doesn't have to happen in a new building with floor-to-ceiling glass windows. It can happen with creative programming and creative use of resources. I struggle with the logic behind tearing down trees and building a beautiful building with a beautiful library that has floor-to-ceiling windows so that people can sit in there and look at books about trees while they're looking out the windows. I'm struggling with where the priority is here. And so I want to encourage you, as you take into account the good point that Mr. Keys is making about the importance of building environmental education and how Tenafly and our Nature Center can really play a leadership role in doing that, that you consider all of the effective options for doing that. And if we've already torn down the trees and built a building on Hudson, let's continue to explore building the Nature Center as a leader of education, but on the existing site, and preserving all of the trees that are in the woods so that our children can see real trees and learn about nature that way.
Hello, my name is Nancy Lewinsky. I'm listening to everything that was said tonight, and I think some of the people here weren't here for the other meetings, but the Nature Center has spoken, presented on its website, and everywhere every person has tried to answer and give information to the best of their ability. A lot of the people that are here tonight are just repeating things that were already said. The answers are there, they're just not interested in hearing them. They've heard this information, they've gotten answers, they don't want to hear it, they're not interested. They have decided against this, and some of them have decided against it, not because they really care about nature, because it's near where they live and they don't want it in their backyard. And it's self-serving, and a lot of the people here come to a lot of meetings. I'm sure they're no strangers to you, a lot of these speakers. My children are in the high school. They're not so young anymore, but my neighbors are. They couldn't make it here tonight. Most of the people, the majority of Tenafly, is supporting this and wants this. This is a small group of malcontented people.
I'm not going to ask, I demand that every speaker get the same courtesy you would like when you're speaking, whether you agree with them or not.
I have been called names at the last meeting, cursed at, booed. These are rabid people who, for some reason, are just malcontented and are not satisfied with anything the Nature Center would have to say. We elected you guys, and you represent us, and I trust that you're going to make the right decisions. I work hard, I volunteer, and I am not paid for it. And I do this and put myself out there because I want something for the future, and it's to take this sort of abuse is not necessary. It really isn't. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Tom Jacobs. I live at 66 Magnolia Avenue. I don't live near the nature center, but we walk all the time in the woods of the Blind Brook Preserve. When Janice and I moved into Tenafly in 1976, we were amazed that a town this size, along with several other supporting organizations, would expend such a huge amount of money to purchase the Blind Brook Preserve, just to keep it as woods, and that everyone could walk through and enjoy. The town was doing what very few towns would or could do, to give a beautiful gift to its citizens and to anyone else who wanted to come. Anyone who wanted some space, clearly with the intent that this property would remain woods for our children and our grandchildren. Now we are being told that at least 2 acres plus a road are going to be cut down and dug up and paved ridiculously in the name of environmental preservation. Everybody here loves the Tenafly Nature Center, and most have contributed to its expenses over the years, and most would be in favor of a new and better facility, especially if it were paid for by contributions rather than taxes. We all know that it could be built at the top of Hudson Avenue with parking and with handicapped access, and possibly at a cost substantially lowered at $7 million, and without all the traffic and drainage problems that are inherent in the East Clinton site. What I don't understand is the manner in which this proposal has been presented to the public as a virtual fait accompli, unanimously supported by the board of the Nature Center and by the council and mayor, all of whom seem unwilling to discuss the issues. It's been offered to the town. There have been lots of proposals that this be put to a binding referendum, but no public consideration of this option has been done, and precious little public discussion of the relative merits of the Hudson Avenue and the East Clinton site. If this project is built on the Blind Brook Preserve, which deserves to be preserved, rather than developed, a baseball diamond and a soccer field will probably not be far behind. I think the woods are more valuable. Thank you very much.
Good evening. My name is Ann Barrett-Guillory. I live at 235 Buckingham Road. I've lived there for the past 17 years. I live directly across the street from the Green Acres site. My neighbors have very eloquently stated the situation with regards to traffic, with regards to possible drainage problems that we may have. Currently, I don't have any. But if there's 8,000 square foot building and the parking lot come and the trees get knocked down, I fear that I may have that problem. But let me speak to the issue of education. I am a college educator and administrator. This is your classroom of the future, okay? It is not building more buildings. To build a large building where we are going to be knocking down trees, this does not make sense. Not to teach people about nature. We are now in the classroom, laptops, iPads. Many colleges give the students iPads going into college. So to be building these buildings, I don't understand this. And as Ms. Aronson said, if you're a creative teacher, you're able to use the space that you have at this point. So building this building and the possible drainage, traffic, where are we going to pay for the policemen to patrol this parking lot when there's nobody there at the nature center? You know, this is something, we are taxpayers. We are not malcontent, rabid people. We pay a lot of taxes to be able to live in Tenafly and to enjoy the beauty of the Green Acres. So thank you very much.
Good evening, my name is Bruce Balsam, I live on Surrey Lane, and I'm a member of the board of the Nature Center. I specifically wanted to respond to the last few people that have mentioned education and issues about good educators can teach anywhere. While that may be true, what these people who are not active in the Nature Center don't realize is that with limited space, there is a very tight schedule, and there is a great demand from the surrounding schools for programs at the Nature Center. Whenever there's a weather issue and a program has to be canceled because of the mismatching then that happens with the school year and the school calendar and the Nature Center calendar, very often those programs cannot be rescheduled. By having a building that is better suited, with better space available, we can accommodate these programs in bad weather, and we can provide the education that everybody agrees, I believe, is very important. So that's one point I wanted to make. And the other thing that I want to say as a member of the board is I've never met a group of people that are more dedicated to doing this project in compliance with all the laws of Green Acres and the town, and to be on a financially sound basis. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and again, we thank you for the opportunity to discuss this very important issue. I want you...
Just mention your name for the tape, please.
Gerald Migro, 5 Stony Brook Road, Tenafly, New Jersey.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Unfortunately, it's because of Tenafly Nature Center's Board of Directors' preference to relocate its new center near Kent Road, many of the beautiful trees and ecosystems will be annihilated without the consent of either the donors or taxpayers who generously supported the acquisition of the Green Acres. We have heard repeatedly from the Nature Center that they've been totally transparent. We've asked on 3 separate occasions for them to furnish the professional surveys, traffic studies, hydrology studies prepared by the professionals, the architects and engineers. That has never occurred to this day. It's not on their website. And before you, Mayor and Council, should consider extending any lease, you should demand and make this information available for a study period of at least 30 days so we can be adequately reviewed by other professionals within the community. In 1976, prior to that, actually in 1974, there was a great deal of discussion within the community. Many of you folks were here, some not. But the Mayor and Council, in keeping with the traditions of government, for the people, by the people, and of the people, decided to submit this issue to a referendum. It won 2/3 majority support. The community coalesced and got together, and the acquisition was made. In that referendum, it talked about preserving that land in its natural beauty. Subsequently, the project agreement that attended the acquisition said the land shall remain passive for open space and conservation use. We had nonprofit private organization looking to sequester 15 acres worth at least $1 million an acre for a period of 24 years without the vote or support of the community. They are opposed to having a referendum. Why, I do not know. It's a fair thing to do. And I turn to the audience. Would everybody here who would favor a referendum stand up, please? I thank you, Mary. And that is my discussion. And since Mike News is here this evening, I would invite him or his other representatives to address the issue as to why the top of Hudson Avenue is not preferred. It's a historic location, and it's very meaningful to many people. We thank you very much.
I wasn't sure I'd make it, but here I am. My name is Bill Kelly, 24 Midwood Road, Tenafly, New Jersey. I keep getting the feeling here that you people are putting the cart before the horse. There's a state requirement. I'm sorry, it's a federal requirement that was issued in July that a thorough environmental assessment be provided. We're still waiting. Also, that same ruling says that the Nature Center people have to consider alternative sites. I know there was a passing reference to the possible site on Hudson Avenue, but it's very obvious that the mayor and council don't want to consider that location. And I'm really not sure why not. Because what I get from people is that it's not a suitable site. Nothing's a suitable site. You can make it a suitable site for not a whole lot of money. You already have the infrastructure there. Sure, that building can be torn down. You can put in a couple of double-wide trailers while you're rebuilding at that location, and finish the job for a lot less money than going over to East Clinton Avenue, I guarantee you. And I don't know why that's not being considered more strongly. It's really important to the people of Tenafly. And I have talked to a lot of people, and the feeling is that the mayor and council really doesn't want to listen. And I'm sorry to hear that. Because it's our town. Thank you very much.
Andrew McAsh, 50 Sherwood Road. I was going to speak, but I guess here I am. I've been listening to a couple of meetings, and I'm not a geologist, I'm not an architect, I'm not an engineer, but I like to listen and think about what people actually say. And I'm hearing a lot of people agreeing that the Nature Center needs more space, it needs to improve the facility that it has. But improvement means usually some kind of an expansion. So there is extra space that would need to be on Hudson Avenue, I assume. Put 2 trailers up. Well, that is a parking lot. So how many trees do we need to remove to put the 2 trailers someplace away from the construction, by the way, because for 2 years, my guess, the Hudson Avenue site will be out of bounds because it's going to be a construction site. So there's another side to all this, and again, I don't know too much about it, but I've been reading a lot. So for 2 years, where is it going to be? Or whatever it is, I don't know, it could be 6 months, but I doubt it. I've seen houses around my neighborhood being built. I was going to do some expansion on my house, and financial realities, and I also looked at other houses. It takes a long time to get anything done around here. Sorry. So if you're going to expand the Hudson Avenue, it may be suitable, it may not be, I don't know. But it's going to be a mess up there. And in the meantime, you have to have a nature center, or you're going to take all the kids and ship them somewhere else into trailers. Where are you going to put that? So I think by the time you add all the expansions up there, and you compare that to whatever site may be needed, and I mean, I'm hearing 2 acres and I'm hearing 15 acres. I can't imagine there's such a discrepancy. So I don't know which one. I assume it's not big. I don't know. But I can't believe that there are two hugely separate numbers being floated around here. But I'm sure that whatever it is, the differential space being used is not that much. If the Hudson Avenue needs to be expanded, and everybody seems to agree that it should be expanded, improved upon. But improvement usually means expansion. You need more parking spaces, you need a bigger building, or you need 2 places for 2 trailers. That's a lot of trees up there. And from what I'm hearing, the Nature Center actually is proposing to reforest the old site and put trees back, so the net damage may not be what we think it is. So I think that, again, I'm not pro, I'm not saying which way I want to vote, because I don't know all the details, but I think that it's not as black and white. I don't think the Hudson Avenue, even if it's usable, to me it's not realistic, because what's going to happen to the Nature Center during the construction? And I think, I'm hearing things about paved roads and runoffs. Well, the closest neighbor that could be impacted by runoff, I think, is the JCC. And I haven't seen them anywhere complaining. I've heard something about gravel parking lot, not paved, and all types of architectural, environmental, new stuff that will be done to eliminate runoff and control it. And I do like the idea of using it as a model for how to make other construction sites or other buildings environmentally friendly. Maybe we can all learn from it. But we'll never know. All right, thank you very much. I'm sorry. We'll never know if you can try.
Mark Feldman.
Mark, just give me 1 second, please. Sure. Just to answer the last gentleman's question, in the lease itself, the proposed lease, it states approximately 2 acres. There's no reference to 15 acres. That was a number that was floated about when they were talking about potential area that could be built upon. And that was explained. I know there are a lot of questions out there, but it was certainly explained coherently that the 15-acre number has nothing to do with the building plot, which will be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 acres, and that includes, by the way, the roadway. And that's what's in the lease. Thank you, Mark.
My name is Mark Feldman. I live at 133 Lowwood Drive here in Tenafly. First, I'd like to thank the concerned citizens of Tenafly for coming here tonight to participate in this discussion of an important community issue. I'd particularly like to thank the persistent people among you, because persistence is the only way you prevail in a situation like this. I would focus on 2 major aspects of the ordinance before us tonight. One is the false urgency with which it's being presented. There is no reason whatsoever to be enacting a long-term lease at this time. As you well know, The project cannot proceed without numerous further approvals from local, county, state, and especially federal authorities, which approvals could take many more months to obtain. The multi-level review process that lies before us may itself result in the identification of problem areas which would suggest that additional protections be written into the lease. So it is more logical and prudent to wait and sign any lease after all approvals have been obtained. My second concern is that, as Mr. Kelly said, you are putting the cart before the horse. Since the Green Acres hearing on April 23, 2013, when the public called loudly for a transparent due diligence process on the Tenafly Nature Center Association proposal, there has been no further release of hard information on the project, no convening of town hall meetings where citizens could ask questions and debate the various issues with the sponsors, no formal opportunities for opposition experts to testify regarding alternative sites and areas of environmental concern, no allocation of funds to support the borough engineers and the environmental commission's involvement in the site evaluation process. Yet you are here tonight potentially to proceed with final enactment of a 24-year lease. Instead, what you should do is require the Tenafly Nature Center Association to release all the records of its private deliberations on the project, specify the steps the government will be taking to vet the assumptions behind the Nature Center proposal, and reverse the decision made on September 10th to delegate authority to the Nature Center Association to prepare the required submissions to the federal government relating to their own proposal. This is a clear conflict of interest, which should be rejected on the grounds it violates objectivity and due process. In sum, we request that the momentous decision embodied in this ordinance be deferred until more detailed evidence, including the federally mandated environmental assessment, has been presented both to the people and government of Tenafly. Tabling this ordinance at this time would do no harm and would help to restore the public's confidence that matters of significant importance to the quality of life in Tenafly will be resolved in an inclusive and informed way. Thank you very much.
1 second, sir. 1 second. Sir, 1 second. I'm going to rotate. Oh, it's fine.
Good evening, everybody. Sean Callahan, 120 Christie Street. I come at this from a different perspective. I'm not from New Jersey. I'm actually from the South, like Martha. I grew up with a lot of space. When I moved to New Jersey and bought a house on 1/3 of an acre and spent 3 times as much money as my mother had spent on her home when she had 2 acres, it blew my mind. And I bought a house that had 14 trees on the property, so I took 6 of them down. Now, does that mean I don't like the environment? No, it doesn't. It meant that I bought a home and I needed it to have utility. And having gigantic trees tearing up the base of my house was not going to help me enjoy my purchase. My wife and I were married for about 5 years and we got pregnant and realized that we were probably reaching a point where we may need more space in the house with a new arrival soon to come. So we applied for a variance. And I testified before a board. And I was asked at that point, or actually told at that point, that I had not done a very good job of planning for my future when I bought this house 6 years earlier. And that really shook my confidence a little bit in government and in the institutions that help government carry out the task that it does. So we didn't get the variance. And I still stayed on Christie Street, and I watched as the community began to evolve a little bit. And just a microcosm on that street. You see, I told that board, I said, this is making sense to me, because communities change as people's needs change. And the ability for people within that community to respond to those changes, to respond to their own changing needs, is part of the beauty of living in this country. So homes got bigger, homes were redone. But I never saw that as a negative. See, I saw it as an enhancement. Because all it did was drive my property value up at the end of the day. Christie Street is a nicer street 12 years later than it was when I bought the house. So my family added a new member. And to be honest with you, my house hasn't grown, but my family has. And we're really at the maximization of our space right now. So in order to make that experience better for my kids, I probably need to add more space. And I realize that my family is really like Tenafly. You see, this community is changing rapidly, as all communities do. And in order for the government to be responsible and to be responsive to the citizens of that community, it has to recognize those changes and it has to embrace them. Not all change is positive, and not all change is easy to accept, but accept it or not, things change around you all the time. Have you made changes to your house? Have you seen changes within the community that you've lived in for 30 or 40 years? Are you upset? Did you leave? No, you embraced that change. Your life adapted to accommodate that change. You know, I have young kids now, and to be honest with you, I'm older, and I look around this room. The Nature Center isn't for us. The Nature Center is for the kids that I was at back to school night for tonight. That's what the Nature Center is for. They're the lifeblood of this community. To deny them an enhanced opportunity to learn is not a good thing. It's a short-sighted way of looking at things. Now, when I first drove up Hudson Avenue after joining the Nature Center, I said, who puts a Nature Center next to somebody's house? It doesn't make any sense. And I'm walking around the trails looking at the bats, and I'm thinking, there's cars on both sides of the street. It's hard to get up this hill. This isn't safe. This isn't good. We have an opportunity. We have an opportunity here. Tenafly has changed. Its needs have changed. The Nature Center has taken the ball and they're running with it. They've been courageous in their efforts to try to make this a better experience, to enhance the experience, not only for Tenafly, but for surrounding communities. And they should be lauded for that, not demonized. Thank you.
Val Block, 21 Brook Road. I'm here on old school night, which probably minimized the attendance. When the Blankham property came on the market, there was a lot of opposition. There was some opposition. Matter of fact, one member of the board rejected the sale. But John Manos and the rest of the council decided to feel the sense of the community and went ahead and had a referendum. Now, the lady over here before, a while ago, made a point. She said that the majority of people here are in favor of the Tenafly Nature Center moving in. Where she got these facts, I don't know. But these facts, she made a point that we should start counting heads. It's up to we should have some sort of a referendum. We should have a referendum to determine the sense of what this community wants, and not, even though you 6 people, 7 people are very intelligent and viable, I think we should get the sense of the community and have a referendum. Thank you.
Randy Parmer, 54 Oak Avenue. I'd like to thank the mayor and council for their service to Tenafly. I hear the pros and cons, whether you're for or against it, whether you would like expansion on Hudson Avenue, would you like a new facility on East Clinton. But what it always comes back to with me is that the citizens in Tenafly voted back in the 70s to preserve this land. And that's what bothers me, not the dissension, not whether you're for or against, but I bet a lot of people would contribute to expanding the facility on Hudson Avenue. But it just annoys. I feel we're breaking a contract to the citizens that voted in the 70s, and I feel today the citizens of Tenafly should have the right to vote again. Should we expand Hudson Avenue, or should we build a new facility on East Clinton? Please give us that right. Thank you.
I didn't take 3 minutes. I have a question. Mayor, I have a question.
There are other people that haven't spoken yet. Please sit.
I will wait for them, but I have a question. You answered something about the 15 acres. You never answered the point that I made. What does it mean in this lease that says that the council and mayor approved the plans? What exactly does that mean?
Is there anybody else that hasn't spoken yet that would like to speak?
Hi, my name is Max Bosch. I live at 148 Magnolia Avenue. I didn't come tonight to speak on this issue at all, but I guess after listening to everybody else, I felt compelled to tell you my position. This is a democracy. There is a very, very loud and vocal group that says we should not do that. And there is a minority group that said, no, we are the silent majority. Now, I'm a Democrat, and this is democracy. I think that the only fair, conduit for this one is really to give the people in Tenafly a voice in this decision. This is land that was bought by people in Tenafly with a specific contract that they will have a voice on how that land is going to be used. To make a decision against the so-called majority for a silent minority by 5 people, it's going to be unfair. So I'm asking the mayor and council to consider putting off the vote for the final decision and consider some sort of giving the Tenafly people a voice in what they want to do with their money, their land, and their property. Thank you.
Anybody else care to speak that hasn't spoken? If you care to speak, at least come down to the front so that I know that you want to speak. Because we're getting to the end of this. We have another public hearing follow this that I'm sure a number of people are going to want to talk about.
My name is Richard White. I live at 20 Oxford Place in Tenafly. And for the person who said that everybody lives living next to it, I live about as far away from the nature center as you can get. I live in the southwest end of the city. Anyhow, I was a scout master in Tenafly from 86. I'm going to be 100 years old this year. I was also on whatever they call them, on the nature center, the board. Was the president for a while. I was there when they were putting in the latrine. I was there, the composting thing that they put in, $20,000 for that, as I remember. We built the education pavilion, which I don't hear everybody talking about. It's an outdoor building built specifically for classrooms. Nobody talks about that. I don't know what they do with it up there now. It was $80,000. We couldn't get the money to build anything. We wanted to build something there. I remember trying to build the shed where they have to put the things into. And myself and a couple of the trustees got together and we poured the foundation according to what the town wanted, about 300 feet down. And whatever we had, and then when we went back to buy it, Caesar stopped that particular building we wanted to put on. So we had to put a little building on a bigger thing. Anyhow, I am permanently against this thing. We were trying to build something behind where the sheds are, and we couldn't get the money for it, so we built the education pavilion. This is not a good thing to do. Build it on the town property. Do not build it on the green acres. I moved into town in 67. When all this stuff was going on, I bought my house for $23,000. My taxes were $364 a year. And now they're over $10,000. So I'm telling you, you're going to end up paying for this thing, and it's going to be a big fishbowl up there. It shouldn't be on Clinton Avenue. If you want to build it on the 200 feet that you got up there on Hudson Avenue. You got the whole thing all along there. You can build a big long one all the way on the whole thing on 9W. Right? Thank you.
I'm Bob Reardon. I live at 78 Magnolia Avenue, and I've lived in Tenafly for 44 and a half years. 3 children born, raised, and educated here. And my wife and I were present at the beginning, if you will, and we're enthusiastic supporters of the acquisition of the properties that we're discussing tonight. I'd like to make 2 points. The first is that I think cutting through everything that's been written in the suburbanite editorials and stated at previous meetings and comments here tonight, I think that there is a consensus on a couple of things. One is that a new facility is needed, and second, that the education that comes from a place like our nature center is vitally important to Tenafly and a key characteristic, a unique characteristic of our community. The second point that I want to make, I think, is a little bit different than what others have said. I believe in education, as most people here have. I think as regards to a nature center, we understand it is not a park. It is not a recreation area. It is a place of learning. It is a place of education, which either takes place through formal means or it takes place through osmosis. It takes place through experiencing that nature. I think that everybody agrees in general about that, which leads to my point. I think that education requires the interaction of those who are educating those who are there to learn. I think over the years we've had programs, we've had instruction, we've had instructors, we've had children who have learned the difference between a park and a recreation area and a nature center. And they've learned about nature, and they've learned to respect, and they've learned to appreciate what they've had. My great concern is this. The New York Times article that says, after we've built on East Clinton Avenue, that guess what? Just 10 minutes from the George Washington Bridge is a jewel of a nature center that doesn't exist anywhere else within the same reach, and please come and enjoy it. And who's going to educate those people that I think are going to come in large numbers? They have a right to be there. I don't deny that. We should take some responsibility in understanding that they do have that right, and that we should help to educate those people that come. But will we have the infrastructure? Because I think that New York Times article will be written, and I don't think that we're going to have the capacity to really absorb those people who are going to come there. If it's less accessible, they are still entitled to come. We may do some things to outreach to some communities that don't have a nature center and could learn from it. But I'm very concerned about an issue I haven't heard spoken to, and that is what happens when that article in the New York Times gets written. And we start finding people who are coming for a picnic on the weekend, or a place to recreate, and it's not a place to recreate, it's a place to learn, or they come to a park, and it's not a park, it's a nature center. I think that's a very serious consideration that relates very much to Hudson Avenue versus East Clinton Avenue. Thank you.
Anybody who has not spoken, wants to speak, now needs to stand up and line up, because we're going to close this off very shortly, because we have another public hearing following this. So if you want to speak and you haven't spoken, please come up and stand in the aisle, and that's going to be it.
Yeah, I'm Don Cornfeld, 258 Highwood Avenue, here. I just want to speak briefly in response to the New York Times article to come. It's very well built, and there's no question that if we place the Nature Center on East Clinton Avenue, it would be much easier for our friends from Manhattan to come here. The only problem is, if we put it on East Clinton Avenue, it becomes more difficult for the citizens of Tenafly, Demarest, Closter, and Preston. Stop and think for a minute. Do you want your children bicycling up East Clinton Avenue to the Nature Center? Do you want them to walk up to East Clinton Avenue? Or would you prefer that they walk up Hudson Avenue? They take their bicycles up Hudson Avenue. That's it. The East Clinton Avenue location is wonderful for those people who want to come to the Nature Center by a 9W. It does nothing. Nothing. In fact, it makes it less accessible to the people from our community who now provide 23,000 visits. There's a possibility that if you put on East Clinton Avenue, there'll be fewer visits. I don't think this Nature Center should be built to provide access to those from afar. I think it should be built for those of us who are in town. And I just want to urge you all to follow Mr. Kelly's advice. And remember that this is our town, and our people ought to be given the opportunity to decide what we should do. Thank you.
Okay, we have three more speakers.
I'm Douglas Murray. I was born and raised in Tenafly and still live in the old family home. At least I do that part-time, otherwise in New York City. We're talking about the Nature Center, and I hear a lot about trees and the forest. A forest is a dynamic organism. And if we're talking about a lease for 24 years, that's a moment in time in the life of a forest. And I'd like to call attention to what happens to wildlife in a forest, and presumably that's what the Nature Center is in large part about. I spent quite a few decades managing some forests in Vermont. And one of the things you do with a forest is to try to create openings in the forest so that wildlife can thrive. Now, you don't pave it and you don't cover it with buildings, but you create edge. And what I'd like to see in the Nature Center's forest, as we did in Vermont, was to create places where you can actually see birds. You don't see many birds walking in the woods. You see birds by standing on the edge of your driveway, as I see them on Norman Place. I've got more birds than I can shake a stick at, because we have openings among all the trees. So I'd be careful about listening too much to the destruction of the forest, the felling of trees. A half acre, 1 acre, 2 acres out of 400 is a benefit to wildlife, not a harm. Thank you.
Steve Savas, 40 South Park Drive. Once upon a time, I was a member of the Borough Council. Presumably, you have much more information available to you than has been available to us about this issue. But from what I've heard about this and what I've been trying to follow for the last several months, I haven't been persuaded that this necessary structure has been located in the proper position. There's been no persuasive argument. Now, perhaps you have better information that has been available to us. But I think, as some of the speakers have called for, you should make this information available to more of us. What is wrong with doing this at tearing down the existing site and rebuilding there? So that's one point. It's been very persuasive. The major point I want to make is that I too was here in the mid-1970s, and I too made a personal contribution and voted in the referendum, and I feel that a promise was made to me by the Borough of Tenafly to keep that property sacrosanct and not to build on that property. I think that's a promise that was made to us. I would like to see that promise kept. If that promise is to be changed, then there ought to be a public referendum about it. So I would urge you not to vote on this now, but to wait and conduct a referendum on this issue. Thank you.
Mike News, 330 Angle Street, Tenafly. I'm the president of the Board of Trustees of the Tenafly Nature Center Association. I have been in that volunteer position for most of the last 10 years. The one thing I will agree with Mr. Feldman is that persistence is really the only way something like this happens. And that persistence is embodied in scores of volunteers for decades who've worked at the Nature Center. Some of you are here, some of you are supporting this project, some of you are not supporting this project. But really, all of us come at it from the same place, and that is to preserve open space, to educate our children, and to teach generations to come to do the same. In 1961, when the Nature Center was formed, it was not formed by referendum. It was formed because this mayor and council purchased land and then entrusted it to a not-for-profit created by citizens of Tenafly. In 1975, when nearly 300 acres was about to be developed into high-density development, this town got together and this town passed a referendum to raise millions of dollars to preserve that land. But unfortunately, that was not enough money. And so what happened in 1976 is the New Jersey State Green Acres, the Federal Land and Water Conservation Fund, the National Audubon Society, the Nature Conservancy, and scores of other people came forward, and that still wasn't enough. And so the Jewish Community Center of Englewood raised the last $1 million in order to save the Lost Brook Preserve. That land was saved by this town. At the time, it was the single largest undeveloped, privately owned land in the metropolitan area. We are now at a third crossroads. And the third crossroads is to create an environmental educational center that will last longer than all of us in this room. The reason I raised the history is because every single entity that raised the funds to save the Lost Brook Preserve have endorsed this project, including the federal government. Okay? The Land and Water Conservation Fund, for 2 years, confirmed that this project was a permitted use, as recently as July 2nd of this year. Subsequently, at the request and insistence on several people in this room, they said, reconfirmed that it was a permitted use, but because the building was not proposed initially, required that we reapply as a change of use. That application needs to be in the name of the borough, which is why the borough approved the project 2 weeks ago.
Michael, I need you somehow.
Okay. In sum, the reason that we are not on Hudson Avenue is documented in the 600 pages on our website. The building is most appropriately set on Clinton Avenue because the steepness of the Hudson Avenue site would require blasting and bulldozing to create a site large enough for universal access, which would destroy the view over Pfister's Pond. And it is much more important for us to take the slings and arrows and stand up for what we believe in and all of it is documented on the website, because we think the traditional entrance on Hudson Avenue, keeping the parking lot, keeping the pavilion, keeping the composting restroom, so that those of us who love that entrance, love Fister's Pond, will be able to use it as we are now. The existing building will be, in our recommendation to the town, is to raise it, restore that to nature, and then have a state-of-the-art facility on Clinton Avenue for the future. Thank you very much.
I'm going to close the public hearing now, and I'm going to ask John, who's the liaison to the audience, please, John.
I move to pass and adopt on second and final reading ordinance 12-13-24, and that notice of same shall be published according to law. I move this motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Well, as we talked about before, I would like, if everyone agrees, I hope they do, that we do modify the lease to indicate that we will have absolute assurance of financial wherewithal of the TNC to complete the project before they put a shovel on the ground. I don't know how we procedurally go about doing that.
Well, let me address that, Barry. Yeah. Actually, that provision, if anything, I would rather put in the ordinance as amended in the ordinance. And I'm actually going to read some language that I just jotted. I'm going to read some language after I explain something, after I jot it down after having my discussion with Mr. Simpson. But in the lease itself, I'll read right directly from the lease in section 5.02. It says that and referring to the Tenafly Nature Center Association, it says, will indemnify and keep indemnified the borough against all liens, charges, and encumbrances, and will at all times keep the premises herein devised and the education center free from any mechanics or other liens which may arise or be created against the mines premises because of said improvements, and will require contractors to give performance bonds in such form and in such amount as the mayor and council shall approve. So, right there, that's right in the lease already, notwithstanding any requirements that may be imposed by law. But since I believe that we're all, at least that I'm of the belief that the improvement to public property would require assurances with respect to there being sufficient funds, we could, if this body is willing to make an amendment to section 6 of the ordinance, to add this following language at the end, because I believe it's superfluous, but maybe it satisfies Mr. Simpson. Adding the following language, without limiting any stricter requirements that may be imposed by applicable federal, state, and or local laws, regulations, and or ordinances. No construction of the Education Discovery Center shall be commenced unless and until the Tenafly Nature Center Association provides a governing body with adequate assurance that sufficient funds are available to complete the construction. Now, sounds good to me. I believe that is already a requirement, but I added in that unless, notwithstanding any stricter requirements, so I'm not alleviating any stricter requirements that may be imposed by law, but adding that in, I believe, just bolsters what I believe is the
Does anybody on the council have objected to that language being added?
And it would be my opinion with respect to that, since I believe it's implicit anyway, that it's not a substantial change that would require republication of the ordinance, and it could be adopted today, assuming that the council is of a mind to do so.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, well, Peter, just if I could, just wanted to finish my comments and thank everyone for doing that. So I'm
absolutely supporting this, and I wanted to just address a few things to the audience, and I really do very much appreciate everyone's concern about the issue. The passion is obviously great on both sides, and it's rather understandable given the rather significant efforts that many who are here now put forth on behalf of this community in the 70s, and that should be greatly applauded and respected. I would say the following, and as somebody, by the way, whose backyard is the nature center, right? One of the trails leaves from my backyard. I think it's the red trail, the purple trail. I'm one who has it in my backyard, and very much supports doing this. And I support doing it because I am convinced of a couple of things. I am persuaded that the promotion of education and the expansion of education of nature is to the benefit of preserving this land that we all love. And when we take a look at what the net effect is between giving back the land that the Redfield building currently stands on and what we're going to have with the 2 acres or so, we're going to net to whatever it is, 1.5 acres. It seems to me to be a very reasonable price to pay for many future generations coming to love and respect the land. And I think as Jennifer, the executive director, has said here on a couple of occasions, and I'm persuaded by it, that modern conservationism understands that when you let people into the land and touch the land, that's when they love the land and that's when they preserve it. And when it's just something people look at from afar, a generation from now, God forbid, maybe a thought process that, why don't we develop that land? Well, there'll be lots of people who grew up here who understand why you don't touch that land, because they've been educated in it. I want to just address also to the concept of the issue that people talk about with traffic. So as I'm apt to do, as those who know me and have heard me speak, I go back on my engineering background and I like to go to the numbers. So the 23,000 visitors we have a year. So what does that mean? Well, that means about 75, we look at 365 a year, about 375 visitors a day. And let's say the Nature Center, I think, has suggested that would be tripled, right? That would be a sort of a nice outcome, 70,000 visitors a year. That would amount to, folks, an additional 150 visitors a day, right? 150 visitors. So what does that mean? That's the equivalent of, let's say, either 3 buses or 30 cars. Now, does anyone really think here, in the context of the traffic on East Clinton, that having either 3 additional buses or 30 additional cars coming through is going to demonstrably affect traffic patterns or the quality of life on East Clinton? I would dare say no. And so to make a final comment on this is that I know there's been a tremendous amount of discussion about, there are public meetings, is there sufficient disclosure and so forth. And I have to tell you, and I know many of you know, that I've been sort of in the vanguard and extraordinarily outspoken about when I feel that there are nefarious things going on, and have not been at all shy about saying it. And I have to tell you, having sat in as co-liaison to the TNC board, that a finer group of people I have not sat with. They are incredibly dedicated in their time and their money and their sincerity, and that is why, that's the final reason why I support this project. Thanks.
I just want to say that I support the project. There have been a few statements here that I just want to correct briefly. First thing is that the...
Into the mic.
I'm sorry?
Into the mic.
Oh, thank you. Okay. First thing is that the mayor and council are not aware of what's going on. We have a lot of information about what's going on, most of which, I think all of which, has been available to you. The website for the borough and for the Nature Center have an incredible amount of information. We listened to the comments here, and clearly a lot of people just don't know what's planned. What's planned is an appropriate building in the Lost Brook Preserve. As it says clearly on the website, the Lost Brook Preserve is the same green acres that the existing Redfield building is. There is no legal difference between the two. I did something else. I went back to the New York Times in the 70s and I read all of the comments that I could find in the 1970s. And I quote a comment that Mayor Manos made after the completion of the acquisition process. The only thing he said is that acquiring the property means that it will remain undeveloped. Now, the word undeveloped has a lot of meanings. The meaning that Mayor Manos clearly had in the 70s was that we avoided the construction of hundreds of residences by Centex or by Blankman, and we avoided the construction of the anti-ballistic missile site that was also being considered for that property. And we preserved that property so that it would no longer be used for developments, and that so long as the Nature Center had control over it, it would not be used for athletic fields. And in fact, the best thing I can do to ensure that the Nature Center, that the Lost Brook Preserve and the total green acre property is not used for things like soccer fields or baseball fields, as someone mentioned, is to give it to to extend the lease to the Nature Center, because I'm confident that during those 24 years, we won't see any soccer fields up there, and we won't see any baseball fields, and we'll see a dedication to conservation and education that they've been exhibiting for all of their 50 years. So that's why I'm voting for the Nature Center ordinance. Thank you.
Just give her a microphone, please.
I just want to say, and I have alluded to this before, I just want to say it tonight, that I don't think anything should ever diminish the efforts and the sacrifice made by the people back in 1961 and again in the mid-1970s to make sure that this nature center with the additional green acres would continue into the future and beyond the future as we know it. It was a wonderful, wonderful thing they did for us, and we should all be grateful now. But by the same token, I think that what is going to be achieved now will take that land further into the future with deeper meaning for the people who will follow after us. The building, the education, the opportunities will more greatly enhance Tenafly, and we all will be proud as we go forward, and we hope that people in future generations will look on our generation and say that we too contributed to what would be a fine future for the Nature Center. Thank you.
First, I think we need a motion to amend the ordinance as introduced to certain language that I recited. Right? So moved. Second. And first of all, I think you voted first on the modification, right?
Yes.
Didn't hear you.
We're voting on the modification first and then on final passage.
All right, they're going to be voting to insert the language I read into paragraph 6 of the introduced ordinance, and then they're going to vote on the amended ordinance.
There's been a motion to insert the amended language into the ordinance. Is there a second? Please call the roll.
Councilmember Barzalato?
Yes.
Councilmember Mahoney?
Yes.
Councilmember Byrd?
Yes.
Councilmember Mosher? Yes. Councilmember Warren?
Yes.
Councilmember Zinn?
Yes.
I will entertain a motion to approve the ordinance as amended.
So moved. Second.
Wait, will you take comments prior to this final vote?
No. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Barzalato?
Yes.
Councilmember Mahoney?
Yes.
Councilmember Byrd?
Yes.
Councilmember Mosher? Yes. Councilmember Warren?
Yes.
Councilmember Zinn?
Yes.
We have one more public hearing tonight. Tony? Mark, you want to read it? Oh, into the mic, please, Mark. We're doing 23 here.
23.
Go ahead, Mark.
I move to pass and adopt on second and final reading ordinance 13-23, and that notice of same shall be published according to law.
Okay, this is a public hearing on the ordinance to appropriate $885,000 from the Municipal Open Space, Recreation, and Historic Preservation Trust Fund for the installation of artificial turf and lighting on Geisinger Field. That number is the maximum. The actual number would be 50% of the project, which could total as much as that times 2, but may possibly be less. Hopefully will be less. So we'll entertain comments from the public for and against. I'm going to do the same thing I did earlier, although there's not as many people here. If those want to speak against it, we'll stand over here. Those who want to speak for it, and since you're the first one up, we're going to limit the comments to 3 minutes.
Joe Lavin, 99 Gordon Avenue. The Tenafly Environmental Commission passed a resolution at our last meeting unanimously with 1 abstention. I would like to read it. We, the Tenafly Environmental Commission, believe the Open Spaces Trust Fund monies should be used for the acquisition of land for recreation and conservation purposes and not be used for any improvements at Geisinger Field. Thank you.
Joe, even though since you are speaking for the Environmental Commission, you could identify yourself as...
I'm the chairman of the Environmental Commission.
Thank you. Anybody else care to speak? Please.
Fred Robbins, 91 Sunset Lane. Now, I had spoken to the council previously regarding the proposed stadium lighting and artificial turf at Geisinger Field, and I want to clarify what I had mentioned. In 2001, the proposal for stadium lighting and artificial turf was strongly opposed, and it was eventually withdrawn. I did not say that it was defeated. In 2005, a proposal for only the artificial turf was overwhelmingly defeated in the school bond referendum. That vote represented a cross-section of all the residents of Tenafly. Why not put this issue on a referendum? 6 miles from the center of Tenafly is the 800-acre Overpeck County Park. The park contains football and soccer stadiums and an all-weather running track with a press box, scoreboard, public address system, and lights for night use. The facility costs Bergen County residents $70 million of our tax dollars. Why should we waste Tenafly's funds to build the duplication of what already exists so close by? The stadiums at Overpeck Park can be rented for $250. Use the open space money for what its original use was intended. There are already stadium lights on the field behind the high school. In the Roosevelt Commons, there are lights at the Little League field and at the tennis courts. Nearby, there are lights at the basketball court and the municipal field. The addition of stadium lighting and artificial turf will only overburden the Roosevelt Common area with increased traffic, increased noise, insufficient parking, litter, and endanger pedestrian safety. Night lighting would illuminate residential areas. There will They will cost the taxpayers for additional police presence. A potential for vandalism and crime will exist, while residential properties would be devalued. It will destroy the quality of life for many Tenafly residents. Let us preserve what is left of Tenafly's village green. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Linda Bowling, and I live at 11 Delaney Place, Tenafly, New Jersey. I've been here for 31 years and 1 month tomorrow. When I moved here, I was a young mother with a 3-month-old and a 3-year-old. As a matter of fact, Mayor, you were my son's basketball coach. So I am not anti-sports, I'm not anti-students. I'm certainly for public schools. My kids graduated both from Tenafly High School and went on to very successful careers.
Linda, push this down.
Okay, sorry.
That's
I do have some serious concerns about the quality of life that is going to exist for the people who live in the vicinity, not necessarily directly across the street on Sunset Lane and Jefferson Avenue, but also my street, which is 1 block up and beyond. Right now, we have the use of the field that we live with, and it has been an experience, to say the least, for the last 31 years at certain occasions where we have loudspeakers, we have music blaring, we have traffic, we have parking up and down the street, we have blocked driveways, but we deal with it because it's not used as much as it will be with lights. The lights will extend into the evening hours, possibly 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, so that when we come home from work, we're going to be dealing with light in our windows, traffic, noise, etc., etc. And I just don't see the purpose. What is it that we have to prove here? Why aren't my children doing homework and going to sleep at a reasonable hour? Why do they need to be playing sports until 11 o'clock? And I would just ask you all to at least consider that the people who live in the area will be negatively affected by the lights. I'm not necessarily against the turf, but the lights I think will affect us more. So I'm wondering why this needs to be approved by the town when Board of Ed has already approved their own, the lights and the turf, I guess, to be paid by Board of Ed money. So I'd like to understand why the town is now asking for $855,000 of taxpayer money to pay for this. If you could explain that, I'd like to hear it. Thank you.
Andrew Mikash, 50 Sherwood Road. I guess I'll put my foot in my mouth a little bit. My understanding is that it's a question of almost $1 million of taxpayer money, or the Board of Ed doing it a year later. So if that understanding is correct, I would hope you guys do the job and find a real use for the money, instead of just saving a Board of Ed 1 year of something that's going to be done anyway. Use it for the whole community, use it for Little League, whatever activities, find new locations for extra fields. You know, some people may say saving a year is worth $1 million. I don't think it is. Because I think, if I'm reading it correctly, that's all we're talking about. Almost $1 million of an open air fund to save 1 year from the same thing being done anyway. Thank you very much.
There's nobody else that cares to speak?
Evening, Jim Coyle, 14 Kingwood Road, Tenafly, formerly 23 Sunset Terrace, proud parent of 4 kids of the school system. I'm a member of the Environmental Commission. You earlier heard the comment of the Environmental Commission. I have 4 points to make, plus maybe a little closing, so I'll try and speak quickly. I don't like the turf personally. okay? That's my own personal opinion. I like grass better, okay? There's some question as to whether or not this is an environmental issue, okay? That's my first point, okay? I just want to say on the record, and I think it's important to me, and it's not a personal issue, but the Environmental Commission was not included in this. We had a vote on this issue because we heard about it from back channels, and one of the members raised the issue. So spending of the money from the Open Space Trust Fund to put artificial tire crumb, artificial turf made from used tires and ripping up natural grass was viewed as not an environmental issue. And the Environmental Commission was not included in this. The Environmental Commission was excluded by the mayor and council. Now, that's my first point. The Environmental Commission is a purely advisory board. You don't have to do what the Environmental Commission says. You can ignore what it says. You don't really even need to ask them, I guess. However, the enabling ordinance of the Environmental Commission, if you read it, indicates that this should be brought to the Environmental Commission based on an ordinance passed by the mayor and council, not an opinion of the Environmental Commission. Now, that being said, why would you not bring it to the Environmental Commission? You don't think it's an environmental issue at all, or you don't want to hear what the Environmental Commission has to say. So the Environmental Commission is unanimously against it. I personally was in favor of a little bit of a stronger statement, okay? I did some research. I do think it's an environmental issue. I discussed this at the most recent meeting. New Jersey's ground zero for environmental problems with artificial tire from turf fields. There's a disaster, an environmental disaster from a field on River Road in Hoboken that hasn't been resolved yet due to high lead levels that were found in this turf. Now you can say that, and you can go to the website of the salespersons for this, and they'll give you facts, okay? They're facts from the salesperson. EPA recommends children playing an artificial turf field don't eat, wash your hands before you do anything else. As I mentioned at the Environmental Commission meeting, that what I used to love to do after folks here who I was coaching against and refereeing my games, I'd bring my kids for ice cream. The EPA recommends that you don't do that, okay? And the story is now out on it. So we're spending the Open Space Trust Fund not for an environmental good, but for an environmental bad, okay? And this is the key point when you bring it all to the table. So if you're going to make a decision and not consider the environmental issues and not include the Environmental Commission and look at other considerations and because you're in favor of recreational issues because you think it's good for the tax base or whatever, but you're not going to consider the environmental issues. We're more of a risk of having the types of problems that they had in Newark, New Jersey, Hoboken, New Jersey, Mercer County, New Jersey, and other cases in the metropolitan area. We should be happy to have our grass fields. There's nothing wrong with them. Thank you for your time.
Anybody else that cares to speak should stand up at the bottom of one of these aisles.
Good evening, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Jeffrey Miller from 187 Leroy Street in Tenafly. Those of you who know me know that I've been very active in the athletic community in town. I bumped into the mayor over the years while he was refereeing, and I've been actively coaching soccer in Tenafly, sitting on the board of the Tenafly Youth Soccer League for 7 years, and so I'm standing here really as a citizen divided, because I really would like to see the turf, but just not with the funds from the Open Space Trust Fund. So I just want to read into the record the resolution or the ordinance number 0518 establishing this expenditure or establishing the levy and what its purpose is. So I'm reading from B, where it says these funds shall be designated for the acquisition of lands for recreation and conservation purposes and the development of lands acquired for such purposes. And then it jumps down to C, where it says If no lands are available for acquisition for these purposes, then and only then, the money in said fund shall be used for other recreation, conservation, or historic preservation purposes as may be permitted by law, to be determined following a public hearing, which I presume this is. So I would like to know what diligence the mayor and council has done to determine that there is no other land available. Is that something that can be
No,
answered?
we're listening to you. This isn't a time for dialogue.
Oh. So, in my short time in trying to evaluate what the purpose of the money is and what the opportunity might be to consider other property, in just a number of days, let me backtrack for a second. When we first began to speak about this, Mr. Mayor, and I've spoken to Councilman Zinna and Councilman Warren about this back in late June, early July, everyone said, well, there's no other property available, so then therefore we want to jump to C and be able to spend the money in that way. I've determined that there are at least 4 other properties contiguous to lands that are owned by Tenafly that could be and should be considered for this purpose. And then there's the McKay property, which would, on 6.5 acres, is a potential acquisition that if we took the sum of the capital raise that this levy was intended to be used for, which could approach $3.5 million, it would make a big dent in trying to acquire and to fully explore the opportunity that the town may just simply pass on to own and control one of Tenafly's historic properties that was owned and lived in by Malcolm McKay. And then the second point I just want to make is that I don't see anywhere in here where it allows for the use of these funds on property not owned by the borough. The borough does not own Geisinger Field. It is a Board of Education property. It was deeded by Malcolm McKay in 1924 to the Board of Ed. And I think I think the diligence has been shy. I think that the appropriateness of the expenditure is wrongly applied, and it shouldn't be applied on lands not owned by the borough. Thank you.
We'll have 2 more people then.
A very, very tired Sandy Devat Moss of 4 Westerveld Avenue. I can't remember actually ever coming here before in such an exhausted state, so if I
You know, you have 3 minutes, okay?
At this point, I have such a headache due to the change of agenda and how exhausted I am. I hope you all have a little attitude. I'm a former chairperson of the Tenafly Environmental Commission. I can't remember how many years I served. I was an 8 or 9 year member of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. And prior to that, I was a mayoral aide on education, appointed by Mayor John Hamburger. And the reason for that appointment, or how I first got involved in community affairs in Tenafly, related directly to the Davis-Johnson Park and Gardens, when 253 Engel Street, in the middle of the summer, not unlike this middle of the summer activity, was suddenly going to become many, many houses. And with a group of neighbors, we together spearheaded an effort. I spoke multiple times to Greenacres, and at the time, I learned that the only way to expand our very precious parkland, open space, in an already fully developed borough, even with the Greenacres on the eastern end, is either through acquisition of new land or linkage to existing parkland. It took us years, from 1993 until 2005, to put forth a referendum in this town for a trust fund, an open space trust fund, public trust, our trust in you, all of you, to do the right things with tax money that we pay. And the primary purpose, unequivocal, even if the establishing ordinance gave latitude to the governing body, was for the acquisition of additional open space. So I ask you, what's the hurry to pave open space with AstroTurf? What's the hurry to spend money that's been very, very slowly, cautiously, at what is it, 1 cent, I forget the ordinance, 1 second, I want to get it, because it's important to note, and I'm tired. 1 cent per $100 of assessed value. We've all put forth based on a public referendum. Now, you came to the Environmental Commission, and we put forth, was actually a partnership, we put forth that there should be a referendum for an open space trust fund. Then, when there was the need, I think it was in 2008, to have a moratorium, not on the 10-year duration of the fund, but on the accumulation of monies during the Great Recession. Again, Eileen Pleva, my friend who couldn't be here tonight, who did say I could speak on her behalf, was spoken to by this body and asked if the Environmental Commission, again, coming to the Environmental Commission, could support a hiatus and then a recollection. So why would I now hear that the Environmental Commission, who gave birth after 12 years of work to the Open Space Trust Fund, would have to find out about this in the dead of night? Something's wrong. Okay, I'll go very quickly. But I think this has to do with public trust. And so it is disturbing. It's very disturbing to think that this advisory body that deals with issues of our environment and open space wouldn't have been consulted. The 2008 Open Space and Recreation Plan makes it very clear on page 1 that the first task of the Borough of Tenafly is to acquire additional lands for open space and recreational purposes in order to meet the growing needs of the population. This is a long document, certainly part of our public record. If you go deep into the plan, I'm almost done. I'm sorry, I waited all night. You would have heard from me in a more cogent state hours ago. This was an earlier item on the agenda. If you go deep into the plan, you will learn that priorities for conservation overlay, the third priority listed is 253 Knickerbocker Road. 253 Knickerbocker Road is the McKay site. 53. Sorry, that's here too. My error. I'm exhausted. And finally, there's a property next to Walnut Park, which is 83 Walnut Drive, that's also here as properties adjacent to open space and conservation holdings. We, the Tenafly Environmental Commission, spent years working to document the potential lands, large and small, from the Nuns to the Friars to the McKay holdings, so that you could put money aside and be ready to act when large parcels or small became available, not to turf a field. Thank you very much for your patience.
Richard White, 20 Foxton Place in Tenafly. I would just like to ask everybody up there, if they were building this thing across the street from you, and they were putting up 70-foot lights outside your house, and 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 your house, would you be happy? Thank you.
You didn't hear?
Yeah, Max Marsh, I didn't want to speak here. I didn't want to speak on this.
Well, who twisted your arm?
I really couldn't find anybody here that supported the whole proposition. And to take money from a open fund trust that is specifically built to basically create green spaces, and with the entire environmental commission voting against it, I could not sit down and not kind of tell my mind. I cannot believe that you guys are going to vote finding a way of using this money against what the trust was really, really meant for, trying to build a parking lot. If the Board of Ed wants to build a parking lot, more power for them. Let's do it. Put it on the vote. Put it on the budget. Let's do it. But the open fund, which is specifically meant for green spaces, should absolutely not be used and found through different subterfuges to go and build parking lots in Tenafly. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. I'm going to close the public hearing. There's been a motion. Has there been a motion? I don't remember.
There's been a motion that needs to be seconded.
It needs to be seconded?
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Yep.
Hold on, Barry.
Sure, absolutely.
I know that Jeff Miller already, excuse me, sorry. I know that Jeff Miller already read from the bonding question that went to the public, and I have read this before at a council meeting. If no lands are available for acquisition, and yes, we do know that land is available, I have asked this governing body multiple times to have a meeting to brainstorm the use of trust funds. We have now decided that we will discuss this at our next work session. Unfortunately, we're going to be voting tonight to give $885,000, almost half of the trust fund money, away to the Board of Education without us first brainstorming together, looking at the property that's available in town, looking at our own facilities and the kinds of repairs and upkeep that they actually need. We have not, as I mentioned before, and I don't want to reiterate, but each of our playgrounds has not been updated in 10 years. They're updating them now because they need to become ADA compliant, but we are far behind other communities in the kinds of facilities that we provide for our children. I just don't believe that we should be using open space money. We have a trust with the public that this was for open space, the acquisition of open space. There is land available. We haven't discussed it amongst ourselves other than this small piece of property on Walnut. And there are so many different things that we can do in town with this money. And I really urge my fellow members to vote no tonight and just hold this up until we can have this discussion at our next work session.
I have a few comments, but before I get them, I would like to ask our borough attorney, given what the ordinance clearly says, given that there is documentation that there is in fact land available, and given that this governing body has not discussed yet whether or not we want to participate in that, I'd like to get the borough attorney's opinion. Is that would it not be a clear violation of the open space ordinance if we would go ahead and subvert the first clause B in favor of clause C when we absolutely know that there's land available?
Well, if you ask a loaded question like that, but actually you're missing something.
Okay.
It's more than arguable that we don't even have to have a public hearing for this, because we're actually within the first part of the open space ordinance. Because what in fact we're doing, and it's not unique in this particular transaction, it's been done before in other municipalities, is that we are acquiring. We are acquiring. If you look and read the definition in the statutory authority for for the Open Space Trust Fund, you will see the way it defines acquire. Acquire is not defined as obtaining ownership of. You read very clearly it's a lease or lesser interest in property. And in fact, we are acquiring property. We're acquiring, and if someone doubts what I'm saying, I invite you to read the statute and read the definition that the legislature, who authorized municipalities to, in fact, create open space trust funds and to impose a tax to acquire. They are very, very, very liberal in their definition of what constitutes acquiring property. In fact, municipalities have acquired rights in Board of Education property using open space trust funds and didn't have to have a public hearing. In fact, what this governing body is doing is they are listening to the public and conducting a hearing when actually they they don't have to actually have a hearing because they're acquiring an interest that they don't have right now in Geisinger Field through the agreement that's going to be entered into a sewer. So to answer,
We listen to you. Now it's your turn to listen.
To answer Councilman Loden's question, no, it's actually not a violation of the ordinance. You may say that in your opinion, or public may say in their opinion, what they believe the intention of the referendum was. But in fact, the actual wording of the referendum and the statutory authority underlying the open space trust funds clearly allow this type of acquisition, because the borough is in fact acquiring rights in property it doesn't have a right to right now.
Okay, so thanks, Bill. So now I'm going to finish making my comments. So, by the way, the acquiring rights is kind of an interesting comment because as of this moment in time, we have not signed or agreed fully to what it is we're getting, which was one of my big objections to this to begin with. We don't have, or we sort of have this kind of fictional lease where we're not even told, right? We're not even told the number of hours that the town will receive in use. That is going to be delayed till October for a joint use meeting, till after this money is given away. But here's the point, or several points I want to make regarding this. One, I was the one in January this year who persuaded this council to consider doing a deal so that we would have Geisinger Field turf, which I do believe we should do. And I also believe that it should be lit up so that we can have full use of it in all the seasons, and so we can be like every other town in Bergen County and have a proper lit up field. And I do understand those who live in the neighborhood who feel that could be problematic for them, and I think that the way that we will have to address that is by ensuring that all the laws and proper parking ordinances behavior are dealt with. And what I would, interestingly enough, go back and look and see with the lit up Little League field have in fact any issues occurred as a result of that. I'm not aware of any, and I anticipate there probably won't be any from lighting this field either. Now, having said that, when I talked about this in January, at the time, there wasn't land to potentially acquire, and so it was my view that we could immediately jump to C and be within both the spirit and the letter of the ordinance, because we didn't have anything to acquire, and so why not do this project? Subsequent to that, the McKay property, among others, have been detailed here tonight, have become available, and we need to have, as Council President Lamastra has indicated, a full discussion about whether we can participate, should participate in that before passing this. There is no urgency to pass this ordinance tonight. Absolutely none. The Board of Ed is perfect, will have its own money without bonding, I might add, to do this project, as I believe Mr. Miller pointed out. A year from now, they're going to do the lighting this coming year, and they'll have all the money raised via their state funding by the next year. So they can do this project without us, without raising new tax dollars or without bonding, and it's just going to be a year. So it would seem to me to be prudent, to be very prudent, to let's just have the conversation at our next work session. Let's explore what we want to do. Let's make sure that we're clear that there is no other use for this money. And if there's no other use, if we can't use it, then it's a reasonable thing to think about. But we're not there yet, and there's no emergency. So we need, in my mind tonight, what I would propose us to do, as I did last time, is to table this or vote no on it now, and then come back to it and be able to, in all good honesty and integrity, and look at all of you and the rest of the town and say that your governing body, with all due diligence, explored the possibilities and really stuck to the letter and spirit of the law, of the open space law. And finally, with respect to our a lease interest in it, in my mind, if I'm leasing a building, for example, or an apartment, then that means that I get to know when I can go to my apartment or my building and for how long I can use it, etc. It doesn't mean that I sign a lease and show up and my landlord says, today, no, I can't use it. A week from now, we'll talk about it. That's absurd. So we need to have a concrete agreement with our friends at the board as to what the terms are so that we know that we have a full and proper interest in it. And then, after we've decided that and we've decided that there's no other use for the money, then it would be appropriate to move with the project.
Mark?
Yeah, in terms of the issue of other properties available, several public meetings ago, two residents came to us and offered us to ask if we would buy their property on Walnut, right next to Walnut Park. And it was $800,000 and change for this small 65 by 150 lot, something of that size. And this body unanimously decided that $800,000 and change for a small postage-sized lot would be of no beneficial use to the town or the residents, and that would be a bad use of taxpayer dollars. So there was a piece of property that came to us. We have $2 million in the Open Space Trust Fund. I'm not clear how we're going to magnify that to the $7 million or so that it would cost to purchase the McKay property, what we do with it, and the tax revenue that we would use it for. The Geisinger Field, on the other hand, for $800,000, it benefits the entire community. Whoever chooses to use it can use it. And it being recreation is a clear, allowable use of the Open Space Trust Fund money. That is one of the words used in the referendum, recreation. And so I see it as a very reasonable use of the money that goes to serve the greatest good for the greatest number of people in the town.
First, to clarify, Councilman Honig talked about the field, whether or not it would cost the borough taxpayers any monies, and absolutely, yes, it would. But going later on in next year or the year after is going to cost the borough numerous dollars to fund this project, and we already have the money. And it's a benefit to use the money that we have now. Now I've heard people come up in the past and this evening speak about the lights and about the turf. Now we're here to vote on the utilization of the funds for a project. Now the project's going to be done regardless of whether we approve this or not. I can tell you they're going to do the lights and they're going to do the turf. We're not here to vote on that, whether it's for lights or for turf. It's going to be done anyway. We're here to vote on utilization of the funds. And, having those funds available to us now, I agree with my colleague, Councilman Zinna, that, if we acquire properties, wherever it may be in the borough of Tenafly, it's certainly going to far exceed the monies that we have right now in the trust fund. So using the funds now for this project, to me, is a win-win for both the kids of Tenafly and the citizens of Tenafly, because our tax base will stay the way it is, because we already have the funds to utilize this project. Thank you.
Anybody else? No, not yet. In case somebody else wants to speak for the first round. No? Do you want to speak, Martha?
I'll speak.
Take the microphone, please.
Before I vote. Which is really just to say that I realize the needs of Geisinger Field. I understand if we don't do this, that we will just be delaying the project by a year. Eventually it will be done. We have the money. We had spoken about this before. I will vote yes on this project. And Mayor, I ask that you call the vote.
Well, I will do that, but I want to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. John hasn't spoken yet, and I believe Nadia wants to speak again.
I don't care, John, wherever you want to do it.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. I will be brief. The trust fund was created in 2000 by referendum in 2005. So we started collecting in 2006, and in that time, the trust fund has not been used to acquire any property. And that isn't because we're trying to protect the trust fund, but because the property, which we see for sale signs all over and property for sale, none of this has really been appropriate for the trust fund usage. We've discussed the most current, two most current offers, the Walnut Drive property, the Recreation Commission, and the Recreation Commission, and there is no particular need or use for that property. The property on Knickerbocker Road would be great to acquire, but it's, basically the trust fund is too small for that. And essentially, it means we have to go outside, which is an option that's still open to us. As Tony said, we have the money available already. We will not be taxing the residents again for that money. So I'm in favor of the resolution of the ordinance.
What I didn't say before, and I want to comment on, is Green Acres. If there becomes property available in this community, we can't rely on Green Acres as we have in the past. This council was very anxious a number of years ago to buy the remaining acre that bordered it was the donut inside of the nature center. And we borrowed from this open space fund, and had it reimbursed with Green Acres. We would never be able to do that again because there is no money at the state, there is no money at the county. We will have to go out for referendum in 2 years again to ask the taxpayers of this community to support a new open space fund. How likely are we to be successful in that effort when the first referendum did not pass by what I consider a tremendous amount? And I'm sorry, with our email system, I couldn't access my emails tonight to actually find those figures. And with all due respect to my governing body members, how can we say that this is the best use of funds at this point when we haven't looked at anything else other than spending a little bit of time talking about Walnut Park? We haven't looked at our own facilities, and I'm very disappointed to hear that the Environmental Commission wasn't really brought into this discussion until we were just about ready to vote. And to Bill's comment, I really, even though we don't have to have this meeting, and I don't understand how we don't have to have this meeting, I still think it's a violation of public trust not to communicate what we're doing with the money. And, and I brought this up before, and I never really get a solid answer, but we have Sunnyside, and it's a mess. We've previously spent money to correct Sunnyside. I hear that it's too much money, but meanwhile, we will still be able to feel a facility that's still subpar and unable to be used an entire season by softball or by soccer or by baseball. we just don't really get answers. And how about our own turf that needs to be replaced? Where will we find the funds for that? I really believe that we shouldn't use this money for this purpose without getting our house in order first.
Peter, I just want to add my final thought comments on this. First of all, my esteemed councilman, Senator next to me, mentioned about people coming to us about buying their property. Was this a discussion that was held at an open public meeting, or is this a closed session thing? Because I'm not recalling this at all.
It was an open public meeting. The residents stood up and the mayor responded to that question.
So the other point about this is Councilman Barzalato mentioned that we're going to have to do additional taxes. There's not going to be additional taxes. The money that's going to the Board of Ed will raise is going to come from their additional state funding and how they build their surplus, and whether or not we take this money out of open space to give it to them or not. As was said, they are going to raise the money. They are going to do it. And actually, they're perfectly fine to wait the additional year if need be. The point here is not doing the turf. I think Mr. Miller put it beautifully. It's not about not supporting the turf or the lighting, because I support doing both. We need to do both. It matters which bucket you take the money from. We can't raise, we have limited open space money, and we're going to have to see if the citizens of this town, after this, will even give us more. So the reality of it is that we can either let the Board of Ed wait a year, take it out of their funds that they're raised, have no impact. They have a $76 million budget currently. We have a $26.5 million budget, just to put that in perspective. We will have half of our open space money prospectively potentially shrunk, right? Take half of our money away and be left essentially handcuffed if we want to do anything. And this all without us going and doing a little bit of due diligence. All I'm asking everyone to do here, and all I think Nadia Lamastro is asking to do, is just let's spend a month or so we're going through the situation, understand what's available, what we can do, can't do, and then revisit it. It's not an unreasonable thing to ask to do some due diligence before we spend precious, very hard to replenish dollars.
You said?
Yes.
Please call the roll.
Councilmember Barzalato?
Yes.
Councilmember Mahoney?
No.
Councilmember Curry?
Yes.
Councilmember Lamastro?
No.
Councilmember Warren?
Yes.
Councilmember Singer?
Yes.
Okay. Next on the agenda is committee reports. Unless somebody objects, I'm going to ask that we hold the committee reports until the next public meeting. No objection. Public comments on anything, 3 minutes max. Anybody can speak? Okay. Under new business, we have nothing under old business. Under new business, we have best 2013 best practices inventory, which is, I think, in our book, correct? Is there anything you need from us on this, Joel?
No.
Does anybody have any questions on the new, best practices inventory? Fortunately, we are, 92%, is it? Have it for me? Joel, do you remember the number? 84%, which puts us in good standing. There'll be no mayor's remarks. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Good evening.